Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about Metronic 8's Gulp build and how you can customize which plugins you want to deploy to your assets or to your project. So first, of course, the same thing that we need to do is we need to get to the latest version of Metronic. To do that, we can just go to our official website, KeenThemes.com/Metronic, and click on the Buy Now up here. It will link you to our theme forest page, and this page will also be a link in the description below, so you can just go ahead and click on that if you choose to do so. Next is, if you have not purchased Metronic, you can go ahead and purchase it. If you already have Metronic purchased, you can actually just download the latest updates for free from this page as well. And once you've done that, it should look something like this. You get this zip file right here, and go ahead and unzip this file, and you get this folder with 4 folders in it. We have our design folder with all of our designs in it, and we have our 4 versions of Metronic. We have the HTML, Laravel, React, and Vue. So in this video, we'll be talking about the HTML version and how we can customize the Gulp build. So let's go ahead and open up our HTML, go into our themes, go to our demo one, and open up our dist. And just open up our index within your browser, and then go to our documentation. Now, if you haven't seen our previous videos on how you can get started with Metronic 8 using Gulp or Webpack, I highly suggest you guys have a look at that first. Add a link into those videos in the description below. However, if you really need to, if you want to have a short recap, you can just go ahead and click on the quick install link right here from the documentation homepage and just follow the steps right here to set it up. Right, so now we want to customize our Gulp build. So to do that, we first need to open Metronic 8 within the IDE of your choice. In this case, we're using Visual Studio Code. And then what we do is we go to the tools folder and go to this gulp config.js right here. So in this file, we have a few things. First, we have, of course, the name of this project, which is Metronic, and then there's a short description. This is the version number that we have at the moment, which is 8.0.23, and then we have some configurations here. So in our config, which is this whole entire thing, we have a debug parameter or field. It's set to false at the moment. When you set this to true, what it does is it'll give you additional notes or additional comments whenever you run the Gulp build. And then we have a compile option, and this compile option basically states that do you want to enable an RTL version, and if you do enable RTL version, if you set this to true, which of the plugins would you like to skip from converting to the RTL version. Now, what RTL means, it's right to left reading. So for example, if you want to have if your project is needed or required to be built in a language that is read from right to left instead of left to right, then you need to enable this option. And these are the plugins that again needs to be it will be ignoring the right to left configuration, in the sense that whenever we run the Gulp build, it will skip select to or line awesome or font awesome from generating an RTL version of it. The reason why we're skipping all this is because we don't actually need right to left versions of these plugins. Because for example, select to is just a drop down, line awesome is an icon, and font also is an icon, and a few other things are just plugins that whether it's left to right or right to left, it doesn't really matter. Next comes our minify and source map options. You can just turn this on and off if you choose. For example, if you want to minify your project, you just turn this on to true. And if you want to minify your CSS, you can also turn this on to true. Or if you want source maps to be on, and you can just turn it on. Next comes our path. This is where how Metronic knows where the source files are coming from. So for example, all of our CSS and JS is coming from the source folder, and we also have a common source parameter right here, which also points to the same location. Now the source folder is this. So if you go to any demo, you have a source folder right here. So if I say if you open demo tree, you also have a source folder right here. So in this source folder, we will have our JS, our media files, our plugins, and our source files. So everything it will be here, and whenever you run a build, it will just push, or we will compile, build, bundle everything, and then it will then deploy it to a location defined in our dist parameter right here. So this is pointing to our dist and then assets, which is right here. So everything that we see from here, or all the files within here, will be then bundled up, or bundled up in a way that is configured at what we have below here. We'll get to that soon, and then deployed into the assets folder. Now we can actually update this path to whatever that your project requires. So for example, what we usually recommend to our customers that use Metronic is you want to use Metronic like a companion, not exactly as your based project folder, because Metronic is again a admin theme or template where we have a huge number of demos or showcases or pages that just to show what kind of functionality, what kind of customizations that you can get out of Metronic. But for your project, perhaps you don't need all of it. You just need like one or two main functionalities. For example, maybe you just need a data table, or you just need the wizard and so on. So you just need to grab those plugins that needs to be run on your project, and that is it. So you will most likely have your own project folder somewhere within your local machine, and then you will have Metronic sitting at the side as acting as a companion. So whenever that you do any customization within the source folders right here, you can preview it within Metronic, and once you've done previewing it, you want to then push it to your project, you can just change this path to your project's path, and then what Metronic's build tool will do then will then compile all of the necessary JS files that are assets that you need, and then push it to your project. We'll get into that in more detail in our upcoming videos, where we show you how you can actually create your very first project using Metronic 8. But in this case, let's just move on. After our configuration field, or configuration field parameter, we then have our build parameter, where we have a huge number of options in here. First, we have our base, and our base options specifically specifies our style source and all of our main JS files, and then we are bundling it into a bundle file called for CSS, and another bundle file for scripts. Now this is again optional. You don't really have to have all of this, and the way where you can remove certain things from building, from say Metronic, from building all this into the assets folder, is you just look at this path. For example, this is JS components and everything within it. So JS components, and then we have all of this in it. Now if your project does not need all of these files, you can actually just go ahead and just delete whichever files that you do not need. It's as simple as that. Same goes with the layout. So if you go to layout, all of this. So for example, if your project does not need toolbars, or your project doesn't need a search bar, this is for example, if you don't need it, you can just delete it and it will not be in your project anymore. Next comes our plugins. Now this is where most of the comments that we get from our customers is Metronic is very bloated with plugins. There's too many plugins within it. Again, that's because Metronic is essentially a demo admin template, where we have a huge bunch of examples just to show you how everything just works very well, and everything just works together within Metronic, and it's built in a way where the look and feel, like the design, the spacing, and even the functionality, the logic behind it, all works really well within the entire package. But if your project does not need some plugins, you can go ahead and just delete it. So Metronic comes with few plugin types. We have our global plugins right here, and we have our custom plugins right here. So in our global plugins, we have mandatory plugins and optional plugins. Now mandatory plugins are mandatory, as what it says. Like we need jQuery, we need Popper, we need Bootstrap, we need Moment for our date, and we need WNum. And then we have optional plugins. So select to is optional. So if your project does not need select to, the drop down for select to, you can go ahead and just delete it like that. Simple as that. Same goes with, then you have flat picker, form validation, and so on. So you have all these options right here that comes with Metronic right off the bat. But if you don't need it, again, you can just go ahead and, for example, if you don't need drop zone, delete it. And then when you run the build, and what I mean by run the build is when you open the terminal, let's minimize this a little bit, and let's navigate to our HTML theme and tools, I think. Yep. And then, for example, here when you run the Gulp, whichever demo you want, it would then not build like this plugin. Okay, so let's move on. So now all of these plugins right here are going to be bundled up into a single file called plugins bundle. So we have the CSS and we have the JS, and then we have fonts and images if any plugin requires it. So CSS is basically like all of our CSS files, like this font awesome, Bootstrap icons, or even the Apex charts. We have a CSS file right here, and we have JS files right here. So they'll be split and bundled up into their own individual files called plugins, and plugins bundle, CSS and JS. So that's what this is all about. And then next comes with our custom plugins. Now custom plugins are separated from our main global plugins bundle. The reason why it's separated is because these plugins are relatively large. They are pretty big, and we do not want to bloat our plugins bundle from what is already for what it already has, because it has quite a number of plugins already, and we don't want to bloat it anymore. And another reason for that is these plugins are not used as often as these other plugins up here. So for example, the draggable plugin is only probably used in 2 or 3 pages within the entire Metronic demo. So for those 1 or 2 pages within the entire demo, we'll just call this bundle file, and that's it, and we're good to go. Same goes with like this plugin called Prism. So we have our source where we define the styles and define the scripts, and then we'll putting or basically defining where it's going to go. But basically it's going to go to the dist folder and under the plugins. This is our data tables. So if we have all these modules within data tables, it's going to be bundled into a single data table bundle, which is one for JS and one for CSS, and so on. Now all this, again, you don't need to include all this in your project. You're free to actually just cut and delete plugins from this config file, and you do not need to worry about building it in your project or bloating your project with all these unnecessary plugins that your project does not need. All right, so moving on to the next part will be custom. Now these custom styles and custom scripts are basically for what we call custom pages within Metronic. And custom pages, what do we mean by that? If you go to our custom like JS files right here, we have a few page types. We have our account page, we have our apps page, and then we have authentication and so on. So what this does is actually is just building all these JS assets or even any CSS or Sass assets and putting it into our custom folder within the CSS. So we have here at the moment we don't have any custom yet. We have one right here. Then we have, as you can see, the account custom JS files right here. Any orders. So let's just show you what these pages are. So let's go ahead here and let's open up our Metronic. And if you go to account, if you go to overview, this is one of it. This is example of a custom page within Metronic. It is basically a page by itself. Like this is an account overview page. So you have like the header with tabs here that changes, and you have like earnings or even a certain progress bar here, and some details, some statistics, and so on. So this is an example of a custom page within Metronic. So we have overview, we have settings, we have security, and so on. We also have apps. So if you see here, we have apps, and then we have a app for customers. So for example, we have a simple page where you have a modal where you just open up how to add a customer, and then you can just add your fields in and you can just submit it and add a customer. Or we even have a customer listing page where you have a data table with all of your customers. So in your project, if you need something like this, you just grab this page and that's it. That's all you need to do. Basically build a simple customer listing page, and all these assets are coming from all these pages. So for example, the customer listing page is coming from apps. Go to customer, and where is it? Lists, and go to list, and we have all this JS files that's relevant for this page that's now going to be bundled up into, or basically deployed into the destination assets. Or this is actually the assets file. The source is right here. Let's go to source, apps, customer, list, and then you see right here, you have these two, and then it gets pushed or deployed into this export.js and list.js. So this is what custom is all about. And then we have media files. Now, if you have any media files within the source, for example, in here, so let's minimize all this, it's my JS media. So if any media files right here, if you, for example, we have some SVGs here, we have some JPEGs or PNGs here as well. And if you want to deploy it into our assets folder, so we just put anything in here and it gets pushed into our assets here, media, and you can see the exact same file structure. Now the reason why we have duplication, or not a duplicate, we have like assets, we have the exact same file structure as our source, is because if you remember, if you go all the way up into our config, we are basically grabbing the source and then deploying it to a certain location. Now, if your location, if you set this location as your project folder, then instead of deploying here, you'll be deploying the assets, this whole entire folder, into your project directly. So you don't have to do any copy pasting over to your project. Right, so what else do we have left? Then we have again miscellaneous. This is for TinyMCE. So TinyMCE requires the CSS to be pushed to a certain location within the plugins, and this is exactly what it does. If you do not need TinyMCE, you can just go ahead and delete this. It's fine. All right, I think this was quite heavy, but basically this is it. This is the end of this video. Hope you found this video informative. If you did, please give us a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, so and turn on the notification bell, so the next time that we release a video, you get an update. Please follow us on our social medias. Links will be in the description below, and I see you guys in the next video. Take care.